An AirAsia jetliner missing with 162 people on board. The MTR West Island line goes into operation. And a warning that Hong Kong may see more bird flu infections in the next few months.
Good evening. An AirAsia flight carrying 162 people went missing early this morning, about halfway through its flight from Surabaya to Singapore. Indonesia and Singapore immediately launched a search and rescue operation, but there's still no sign of the plane. Alan Buknia reports.
Anxious relatives at the Surabaya airport wait for any news. 156 of the people on board were Indonesian. The others were 3 South Koreans and 1 each from Singapore, Malaysia, and France. Flight 8501, an Airbus 320-200 twin-engine single-aisle jetliner, was en route from Surabaya to Singapore early this morning when it encountered bad weather. AirAsia said the plane was on its submitted flight plan, but the pilot requested a change in course due to the weather, just before it went missing about 42 minutes into its flight. Indonesia's acting Director General of Transportation said a search and rescue operation was immediately launched in cooperation with Singapore. He said they're not presuming anything about what might have happened. He added there's no distress signal from the plane. AirAsia is a regional low-cost carrier founded in 2001 by Malaysian businessman Tony Fernandez. Flight 8501 is the 3rd air incident connected with Malaysia this year, following the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 in March, with 239 people on board, and the deaths of 298 people on Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, shot down over Ukraine in July. AirAsia has a good safety track record and has never lost an aircraft. The airline said the Indonesian captain had 6,100 flying hours, which is substantial. The French co-pilot had 2,275 flying hours. Hopes are high that the plane will be found, since its intended flight time was under 2 hours, and there is a known position when it disappeared. Alan Buknia, TVB News.
The MTR West Island line went into service today. It provides a convenient and fast mode of public transport to residents of the western part of Hong Kong Island. As Owen Feng reports, it has also brought changes to neighborhoods in the area.
After 5 years of construction at a cost of $18.5 billion, the first train departed from Kennedy Town at 6 o'clock this morning. Many railway aficionados came to try out the new rail service.
I live in New Territories because this is the first time to be in service, so I want to just test to join it.
Some Kennedy Town residents are also pleased to have a train station in the neighborhood.
I need to go to school at Kowloon. In the earlier times, I need to change bus in Central. But nowadays, I can just exchange the island line and come to my home. It can let me save a lot of time.
Next station, HKU.
After Kennedy Town, the next stop is the University of Hong Kong, or the HKU station. This morning, more than 70 university students came to take the first train. The new railway, which is an extension of the Island Line, also passes through Sai Ying Pun and Sheung Wan. But the opening of the Sai Ying Pun station will be delayed until the end of March because of construction difficulties due to poor ground conditions.
Sai Ying Pun. Doors will not open as the station is not yet in use.
For now, trains will stop by Sai Ying Pun for a short while with the doors closed. The West Island Line is 3 kilometers in total, and from Kennedy Town it takes around 7 minutes to get to Sheung Wan.
We believe that with the opening of the western extension of the Island Line, that would help relieve some of the traffic congestion on the roads around the western parts of Hong Kong.
The West Island Line has not only brought convenience to residents in the western part of Hong Kong Island, it has also led to significant changes in the neighborhoods there. Raymond Lee, a real estate agent, says many warehouses and garages in Kennedy Town have been replaced by restaurants. Rent and property prices along the West Island Line have also gone up by almost 30% this year. Minibuses in Kennedy Town also face greater competition from now on. While minibus operators on a service route between Kennedy Town and Causeway Bay reduced their fares earlier, drivers on this route to Mong Kok on Kowloon side remain confident that the new rail line will not affect their business. Owen Fung, TVB News.
A medical expert says Hong Kong may see more cases of H7N9 bird flu in the next 2 to 3 months. This as a local woman who tested positive for the virus remains in critical condition. The 68-year-old woman who tested positive for H7N9 remains in the intensive care unit in Two Moon Hospital. She is still suffering from a fever and pneumonia. The patient has admitted to eating chicken during a recent trip to Shenzhen. It's believed that the woman lives in Fu Tai Estate in Two Moon, and at least 7 of her relatives are being isolated for observation at Princess Margaret Hospital. She received treatment from 2 private doctors before being admitted to hospital. The Center for Health Protection is tracing all the people who had been in contact with the patient. Officials said the woman failed to declare that she had traveled abroad while seeing the doctors. Despite this case, many people we talked to did not appear to be worried about the spread of the virus. I had chicken yesterday. I believe it all depends on one's immune system, this one says. A health expert meanwhile warned people not to go to wet markets or touch poultry across the border. Ho Pat Leung, the director of the Carroll Youth Center for Infection at the University of Hong Kong, said the virus can linger in chicken feathers or the excrement even though the birds have been slaughtered. So people who don't see live poultry in their surroundings can still come into contact with the virus. He also pointed out that many people in Hong Kong go to the mainland during this period of time, so he expects more cases of H7N9 to appear in the SAR in the next few months.
The Financial Secretary has refuted criticisms that he is overly optimistic in projecting the government's yearly budget surplus for the next few years. Liz Yoon reports.
Financial Secretary John Tsang wrote on his blog last week that the government is likely to see a yearly budget surplus in the next 3 fiscal years, provided that there's no major unexpected events. Some criticized Tsang for being over-optimistic. Today, the Financial Secretary explained on his blog that he based his projection on the Financial Budget's Medium Range Forecast, or MRF. This year's MRF predicted a budget deficit for the 2015 to 16 fiscal year. But Tsang said today that's no longer the case. Rather, he expects a surplus for the coming fiscal year, as the health protection scheme, which will be rolled out next year, is expected to cost less than $50 billion, the amount reserved for the project. He also based his latest projection on the assumption that there will be a 3.5% economic growth in real terms, as well as a 2% cut in government expenditure over the next 3 years. He said the resources saved in the process would be used for new projects, and this would allow the government to spend public money more efficiently. Earlier this year, the Working Group on Long-Term Fiscal Planning pointed out that the government may experience a structural deficit in the next 7 to 15 years. Tsang said he will take that into account while drafting next year's financial budget. And he sees a need to work on financial planning at this stage for important public policies, including the $27 billion housing reserve. Liz Yun, TVB News.
The Customs and Excise Department has cracked down on a syndicate suspected of smuggling mobile phones across the border. As Rani Samtani reports, officers arrested 5 people and seized almost $5 million worth of goods.
The Customs and Excise Department says the large demand for second-hand phones on the mainland has given rise to illegal smuggling. During an operation this month, customs officers seized more than 4,000 used mobile phones.
In the recent months, there's a lot of new models of mobile phone on the market, As a result, there's a plenty supply in the second-hand market, and the price goes down significantly. At the same time, there's still great demand on the mainland. As a result, there's great incentive for the smuggling syndicate to smuggle the second-hand mobile phone from the territory to the mainland.
To smash the syndicate, Hui said the department exchanged intelligence with its counterparts on the mainland. On December 17th, customs officers intercepted an outbound container truck at the Lok Ma Chau border control point. Authorities found a batch of used mobile phones hidden in false compartments of the axles of the trailer. Later, officers searched a cargo yard in Tin Shui Wai, where they found another batch of used mobile phones suspected for smuggling. A total of 4,467 second-hand mobile phones, 3 vehicles, and some tools were seized. The goods had an estimated value of $4.8 million. 5 men aged between 22 and 51 were arrested in the operation. Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
The government will launch its second round of consultation on political reform next month. The vice president of a state-funded think tank expressed worries today the consultation would invigorate a new conflict over Hong Kong's political future. He suggested the government should fine-tune its governing style. Leung reports.
Lau Siu-kai, vice president of the National Association of Study on Hong Kong and Macau, told TVB News today the central government still has confidence in Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying. He pointed out that both President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang affirmed Leung and his administration's efforts to promote reform during his latest duty visit to Beijing. But Lau expects more protest actions from the pro-democracy camp during the second round of consultation on political reform.
Well, given the fact that China is taking a hardline position toward political reform, I don't think there is too much elbow room for the Hong Kong government to do something to appease his opponents. So I expect the next round of consultation not to be able to really bring about peace politically, but there may be opportunity for another round of protest actions.
Lau said Beijing will work on uniting all pro-establishment forces in Hong Kong to support the government. With their support, Lau believes the chief executive would be able to make progress in implementing non-controversial policies, such as those relating to economic development and people's livelihood.
The occupation movement has, to a certain extent, eroded the authority and the ability to govern of CY Leung and his government. And given the fact that he is only 2.5 years ago, it is really difficult for the government to make and implement important, particularly controversial policies.
In solving the current crisis, Lau thinks it's impossible for Beijing to retract its decisions on the SAR's political reform. Instead, Lau advised the government to show greater tolerance and be inclusive in assessing public opinions, including views from the opposition and young people, before making its decisions. Leung, TVB News.
And still ahead, chaos at some London train stations due to overrunning engineering works. In New York, the funeral of a police officer killed in ambush. And the man who shot and wounded Pope John Paul II visits the Vatican.
A prolonged Occupy protest, blocking vital roads, plunged Hong Kong into one of the worst political crises in history and led to unprecedented social polarization. Sunday night, China Ping An Online Insurance presents Hong Kong Review 2014 at 8:30 on Pearl.
Cursor in. Capture full HD video resolution at 60 frames per second. With a tilting flexible monitor and integrated Wi-Fi to create and share instantly. Unleash your inspiration with the 24.3 megapixel